Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Oh, yeah, get excited out there in fantasy land. That music hits. You know it's time to kick some ass, man. We're back here. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined as always by the analytical assassin, Dwain McFarland of Pro Football Focus and Establish the Run. And, Dwain, we got ourselves a Hall of Famer on board tonight. We're not screwing around.
I'm kind of nervous.
Yeah. You may know him from his work on Sirius XM with the football diehards alongside Mike Dempsey. He is an FSWA Hall of Famer, and near and dear to my heart in a journalism background is the senior editor at Football Diehards, and he's responsible for tons of the great magazines you see on the newsstand. It is Bob Harris. Welcome to the Hustle, Bob.
So I'm just making sure nobody saw me dancing. The tune was great, man. I was working a little bit.
We can't guarantee nobody saw it. You looked great.
Fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we're so lucky. Thanks. Shout out to our buddy Jeremy Carroll. I got a buddy of mine, an old fraternity guy who works for the Mets, SNY. It's like the station the Mets own and all their games are on. He was just bored during COVID when there's no games. And he goes, "Hey, I made this for your show." Like,
it's awesome.
Great. Thanks, man. See, beer's on me.
Totally jealous.
Well, your goal needs to be, if you can get free liquor out of Drake before the show's over.
A few guys have. So Mike Clay's gotten pumpkin beer for free. Joe Dolan has gotten some bourbon for free. So we'll see.
It's confession time. It's been 30 years since I've had a sip of liquor. So
I hung out with Bob at the King's Classic in Canton, Ohio. He wasn't drinking out there, but was the nicest guy ever. Had the pleasure of having breakfast with him even the next day, and Jim Coventry and a bunch of the great guys out there. So really looking forward to it. And we're really looking forward to this episode because if you're listening to this, chances are you still have a draft coming up Labor Day weekend. This whole week is jam-packed. I know I've got a couple of big ones. Dwain's drafting his ass off over here in different formats, and Bob says he's still picking away. So we're going to kind of dive in, and the flavor of the day, folks, is running back. And we know everyone's in the running back business. And one team who's apparently not in the running back business, at least not the Leonard Fournette business anymore, are the Jacksonville Jaguars. Today, they released the 25-year-old running back after just 3 seasons. This is, again, guys, after he tallied career highs in yardage with over 1,100 and receptions with 76 last year on his way to finishing as RB6 in PPR formats. So I guess, first of all, Bob will ask if you're shocked by this. And I know Dwain wasn't targeting him anyways, but just initial thoughts on Fournette exiting Jacksonville stage left.
Yeah, I was relatively shocked. As you mentioned, my co-host Mike Dempsey, based in Jacksonville, the team's flagship station. So we've had guys coming on, and he's ridiculed them for, saying, "Oh, they're," if they say, "Well, it seems like they might release Leonard Fournette." No, it's not happening. And he says that because he's talking to people who are there on the field every day who are telling him, "No, they're not going to do that." So I think everyone's a little surprised to some degree. I think more, than anything, it's just kind of points to a general dysfunction in that front office. I mean, you look at all the draft capital they've invested. It's now playing for other teams or soon will be playing for other teams. And it seems a little odd that they can't figure it out. And why did they handle it like this, wait this long? Seemed like, trading him before the draft and getting something for him and using it in the draft made sense. But once you got past that, I'm not sure, why did you wait till now? And even Dempsey mentioned today, still there's 5 days left before it's time to get ready for the game. What if somebody gets hurt? What if one of these, what if one of the guys that we're all looking at now get hurt? So it seems like an odd move to me. Mm-hmm. But mostly I think it just, sends some it's cause for concern. If you've already drafted and you're like drafted somebody on a team where, wow, they're kind of high up in there in the waiver order, you're wondering. And I think that's right now, look, for Leonard Fournette, I think that's the biggest question now. Does he blow up a draft you've already done? Right. And so that's what we'll be watching for tomorrow when the waiver claims come in.
Dwain, what do you think about these guys who are left over here in Jacksonville? You got Raquel Armstead, the Temple product, but he's missed 18 days of camp. He was on the COVID list. People just assume he's there and rocking and rolling. Then they got this UDFA kid, Divino Zigbo out of Nebraska. I guess he's been getting some reps and turning heads. And our boy, Chris Thompson, he's going to play that third down Jay Gruden role. So where are you putting any chips in this Jacksonville backfield, if at all?
Well, I still think Armstead's the number one chip, to put down, until we know something different. But Ozigbo is a guy that, people have been talking about for 2 years now. It's not like this is brand new. I mean, they talked about him last year in camp and the things that he was doing. So there's been a pretty consistent, drumbeat, to use a Sigmund Bloom term around him. So I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I adjusted my rankings over at PFF, earlier today. And I put Raquel Armstead in a PPR format. I put him up, in that range around, I put him behind Devin Singletary and Zach Moss and all those guys. But I mean, I've got him right, in there. I think, he's probably going to be good for, 200 carries or so. He's going to get some targets. But I think Ozigbo will then spell him, for probably another 100 touches or so, catch some passes. But then to your point, I think Thompson will really be the 2-minute offense back. He'll be when they're trailing, which could be a lot for this team. I think he'll be the guy that'll be on the field. So I think in a PPR, for as long as Thompson's healthy, he's a guy that you're probably still going to be able to get late. I moved him up basically up right behind the Duke Johnson. I put him in that same tier. I think he's going to be used that much. Now you may not have him for the whole season, but he's going to get favorable game scripts, to get on the field. So they're not guys that I'm, like running to, Drake. It's like if they kind of slide, if I'm drafting tonight, period, like the way I typically play something like this, I know we haven't talked about Kamara yet, but if I'm playing this until the news really settles, what I want to do is I want to buy, the cheapest ones until I kind of hear more news. So like I wouldn't be buying Latavius Murray tonight. I'd be trying to draft Alvin Kamara, right? But I draft a lot of teams. So if you only draft one, don't, I get it. You want safety, don't draft, a guy like Kamara. But on, the Jaguars, for me, because we don't know for sure, even though I feel pretty good about Armstead, it's not like I'm forcing it. I'm probably going to be drafting Ozigbo, even more because he's still going to be the guy that a lot of people still won't be paying any attention to. And I don't think Chris Thompson will really move up probably enough. So I think he's still going to be a value in drafts. I mean, we'll see. The news just happened. I've got buddies drafting right now, so I've got to see what's happening with these boards. But that's kind of my approach, to it. And the guy that's just hanging around out there, I don't think he'll be a Jaguar just because they seem to be cleaning house. But there's a lot of teams right now with questions. It's like, where's Devonta Freeman, gonna end up? That's the other guy that, just like now Fournette sitting out there, you could have two potential guys landing on teams that could, really hurt your draft.
Bob, we've got a good question in our chat room here, and we love all the folks that watch on our YouTube channel. We appreciate you subscribing there. That's awesome. Somebody just asked, where would you draft Fournette, being that he's a free agent at the time of your draft?
Look, there's enough running backs available in that range that I'm probably avoiding all these guys. But as I was adjusting my rankings, I'm kind of in the same place with Dwain on Armstead and Ozigbo, like about, 60-40, kind of range. And honestly, if I'm drafting a component, it's probably going to be Thompson as that, off week high guy with enough floor and a PPR that you could play him and feel like you don't take a zero. And if you get more, that's great. Fournette, I'm trying to figure out, my immediate thought was, I'll just move him down the same place Devonta Freeman is. I thought, no, man, if somebody picks him up, this is going to be a little more interesting. So I kind of have him basically in the same range I still have Armstead and Zigbo, right? I mean, just kind of, in the middle of the pack. I don't know if anyone needs to be drafting him, and we'll all have some time to figure out where he's going. So, I mean, for the time he's not on a team, I'm probably going to avoid him just like I would avoid Devonta Freeman unless I'm in best ball. But man, I think we're all just going to wait here with bated breath until he lands in a spot, and we're all going to hope he doesn't screw anything up. And if he does, like let's say he goes to Chicago, right? Like my shares of David Montgomery won't cry because they were pretty cheap. And if I get a decent price on Fournette, maybe that's a good fit for him in an offense that wants to run the ball more, that has a lousy quarterback. So, or Washington, where, my double-digit shares of Adrian Peterson, I will not weep for those either. And I think, wow, here's a guy who could maybe come in and get a dominant piece of the workload. So a lot of this is going to hinge on where he goes. I should probably move him all the way out, until I know where that is. But I'm kind of just hovering right now.
Well, I think it's the smart play to buy him. I mean, just like,
Right.
talking about if Kamara falls, you buy. I mean, now's the time. I'm not a huge Leonard Fournette fan, but now's the time. And tonight in FFPC, I saw earlier Fantasy Mojo posted on Twitter. I mean, these are pretty serious drafts. He's going in the 8th round. I think that's about right.
Right.
I'm not going to draft him over CeeDee Lamb, but once CeeDee Lamb's gone, I mean, he might be in play for me, just to see where he lands. And I know that I can put together a plan that allows me to just not even count on him and say, okay, so here's what I'm going to do in these next few rounds just to offset it. But I'm just going to basically put a lottery ticket out there on Fournette. He's still a young guy. He can be a banger. I mean, and there's a lot of teams that need a running back. I mean, there's a lot of teams with unsettled depth charts right now. So, I mean, I think there's some good landing spots that he could potentially go to. Now, will he get the kind of workload he got in Jacksonville? Probably not. But I think there are a couple of places that if he landed there, would it surprise us if he, like by week 3, was the lead back and just had it for the rest of the year? I don't think it would. So I think that's about right. Where I've got him is down in that Damian Harris, Alexander Madison range. Once you get into that group of running backs, I think he kind of fits the bill of, an upside guy, that could potentially take on a bigger role than we think. And he's still probably got some gas in the tank.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And look, I mean, you look at the waiver order for starters. I mean, Washington, the football team, picks pretty damn early. I think it's Cincinnati, then Washington, if I'm not mistaken. So,
right.
It would not shock me if he does not last that long on the way. And nor would it surprise me if he goes unclaimed and everyone just starts negotiating with him. And then we'll all sit here in horror and wait out and make sure the Chiefs don't. I mean, that's the thing I just hope doesn't happen.
I know.
Where he's just going to blow up somebody's ADP and kill it. But again, Dwain, as always, is correct on some of these things. You want to leverage the tendency of fantasy owners to react like a fish when the lure splashes in the water. Away they go. Okay, they're running away from him. I want to run towards him kind of mentality. And I did it with Miles Sanders, right the day after the injury when I got him early in the 2nd round, I think 14th pick overall. I mean, that wouldn't have happened had we not got the news the day before. Oh, it's week to week. And, so and the same thing with Kamara right now. And honestly, if I'm drafting and I like Dwain, I'm in a lot of drafts. It just may depend on what kind of draft I'm in and what I've done recently. I might say, well, I'm kind of saturated on Kamara. Maybe I could just pivot this way. And there's enough guys in that range that I feel comfortable going away from him. If I saw him dropping, though, if I was drafting later in the round, I said, oh, there he is coming down to number 10, these people. And I'd jump on that. So I just think it depends on the circumstances of the draft and whether I'm going to chase that or not.
Anybody out there who is unsure of this Alvin Kamara news, he's missed reportedly the last 3 days of Saints camp with an unexcused absence. This, according to Adam Schefter from ESPN. He's seeking a contract extension. He's currently due $2.1 million on the final deal of year of his rookie contract. Now, his ADP in the the Football Guys Players Championship over the past 2 days is 1-4. So it's not like this is a guy you're getting at the end of the first round or swinging on the turn. This is a top 4 pick.
Yeah.
So
and he's still going like tonight, Drake, like a 1-6. Yep. He went 1-8 in a main event, just 30 minutes ago.
And so there's a little bit of talk, a little bit of additional talk tonight. Mike Garofalo from NFL Network suggesting that there's maybe an injury involved too, which leads you to believe it's maybe of the migraine variety of injury, which is the kind of thing, the hold-in kind of injury where you're waiting to see if the money comes. And look, for all we know, in the case of both Kamara and Joe Mixon, kind of dealing in similar circumstances. I mentioned the migraines. That's been his issue. Maybe there are contracts in the works and they're just trying to finalize and get them done. And they're just hanging out because of that. So, look, Adam Schefter's reporting is pretty good. I'm not saying he's off base on this, but there's a little bit more context has been added to that. And that, they're talking now of an injury as well. So that maybe lends him. And I think Garofalo admitted maybe some money would make this injury better.
Exactly.
Yeah, with the Saints, the one thing you have to worry about is they've been literally putting off an explosion in the salary cap for years now. I think next year they're projected with the changes that will happen to the cap because of reduced revenue this year. I want to say they're charted to be at a negative $75 million deficit against the cap. So Kamara really worries me. If he takes a hard stance and he does the hold in, right, like what Bob was talking about, so that he can get his year of eligibility and not lose that, man, I don't know. What, to me, that could turn into something where do they trade him, right? Because they can't just sit there, with him. They probably aren't going to be able to give him the contract that he wants. And I was kind of wondering this when they signed Ty Montgomery, right? It's like they had Latavius, and then they went and get, they have Dwayne Washington, who's kind of like Latavius light. And then you've got, Montgomery, who's kind of like, Kamara light.
Yep. And
do they just want to combine those two guys to basically, take over kind of what we used to have with Ingram, and maybe more like a, who's all these running backs that I can think back to, that Pierre Thomas, those kind of guys that always did well with the Saints. So another guy to keep an eye on, Drake, is Ty Montgomery. Like, most people won't even draft him. But I think it won't just be all Latavius Murray. I think, Montgomery will be a guy that'll be involved because he can do a lot of those things in the passing game that Kamara can do. I don't see him getting the amount of touches, as far as attempts as what Kamara gets, but I think he could definitely do some work, like a Sproles type guy, not as explosive as Sproles, but, he can run routes. He can get open against linebackers and safeties, which, Sean Payton will put him to use.
Yeah, you count on Sean Payton to come up with creative ways to use talented players and create mismatches with them in particular, and that'll work in the benefit of other players in that offense as well.
A talented player that was in that Saints organization on their practice squad, but they couldn't keep him, and he maybe could have filled this role, was Boston Scott. And Boston Scott now, as we know, is the backup to Miles Sanders in Philadelphia, who has an ADP right now of about 112. And I want to ask you guys, with word from SiriusXM's Adam Kaplan that Sanders is battling a hamstring injury again, which he also had last year, they say he'll be ready for week 1. You've got now Jalen Reagor, who's going to miss a month. You've got Elshon, who's going to miss possibly the first couple of games. You're missing your right guard in Brandon Brooks. You're missing your left tackle in Andre Dillard. It's getting crazy there. Jason Peters wants more money to play left tackle. Are you guys buying Miles Sanders with this kind of lack of other options in Philly, or are you running away because you're saying there's too many issues here in Philly? And one of my favorite Bob Harris isms is, when there's a burning building and everyone's running away, I'm running in.
Yeah, and I have been on Sanders, and I thought Adam Kaplan's reporting was pretty optimistic in my mind. I mean, called it a strain. And said he saw him doing drills on Sunday that suggested it's not that bad. And that's what they've been telling us all along. So I'm going to buy into that. Boston Scott, though, is a guy in best ball that I think one of those really late round guys that I have invested in heavily. Just look, it is kind of you mentioned the Sproles light, or this is kind of the Sproles type role. And he was pretty serviceable in it last year. And you never know with injuries, since they have not gotten anybody else, brought anyone else in that backfield. They're clearly going with the guys they want. I'm kind of looking at how last year finished as what they think they'd like this year's plan to be. And if it works out that way, then he'll have some value.
Dwain, what do you think about value of these backup running backs like a Boston Scott, like a Latavius Murray, who are out there? And in your drafts this week, they're going to be available, 10th round on.
Yeah. Well, Murray won't be. Murray's going to jump into probably the 6th or 7th round now. Like, if you draft tonight, you probably have to pay a 6th round pick to get Latavius
People
Murray.
are going to be thinking back to that Arizona-Chicago 2-game run where he just demolished 2 of the toughest defenses in the NFL, not just as a rusher, but as a receiver. So, yeah. I mean, that's what they're going to chase.
So what I would tell people, Drake, is, again, it's roster construction. So you need to draw a line of what backs you would take over Latavius Murray. And then let's say you're in a situation where you still need a running back and you get to Latavius's name. What you need to be able to do is be realistic with yourself and say, you know what? I'm probably going to get 4 or 6 games out of this, and Kamara's going to come back and play, right? And so what do I think that's worth to me? If I drafted Jonathan Taylor in the 3rd round, Latavius Murray is like a golden ticket. If you're okay with the opportunity cost of the receiver, make sure nothing else of super value hasn't fallen to you there. But once you kind of do your checklist and you look through those things, then I think Murray's in play. And if you get lucky, I mean, Kamara holds out longer. And like I said, I mean, who knows? This could end up being a trade, and if he gets traded away, well, now you're sitting on a guy that still, like, for example, the way I look at, Armstead, his peak value is probably right now. And then people will start to back off because they'll be like, oh, the Jags suck, and they do, and they'll be right. That's why I didn't, I was worried about Fournette anyway. I don't like running backs that don't have offenses that don't get inside the 5-yard line. But if you look at a guy like Murray, technically, even though I'm saying, hey, don't buy tonight because I just want to hear a little bit more about Kamara. But technically, like what you have to remember is if Kamara all of a sudden gets traded, Latavius Murray's value shoots to like the 3rd round. So he still has upside to move from where he's at. So if there's the right strategy in play and you're doing roster construction, like what we tell people, it's chess, not checkers, you're thinking multiple moves ahead. I think there's a way to use Latavius Murray. It's like what we told people last year, Drake, around, hey, use Austin Eckler for your first 4 games. You draft him and Miles Sanders back to back. And then by the time, Melvin Gordon comes back, if that really hurts Eckler, well, maybe Sanders is starting to take off by then. Now, we didn't know we were actually telling them to draft the one that would actually be the better of the two, and Austin Eckler. So it worked out great for people that took that advice that were telling us, hey, won my fantasy league. I drafted Miles Sanders and Austin Eckler back to back. And we're kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, we told you to do that. But to be fair, we didn't know Eckler would be that great. But it's a similar thing, right? And it could still work out great for you. There's still upside in Murray. But again, I would say make sure there are the other guys that you feel really good about drafting him over. So what that list would look like is players that you think have a solid role all year long, right? Murray may have a hotter role out of the gate, but you anticipate that it will probably dissipate at some point because Kamara will come back.
Bob, what are your thoughts on this kind of 3rd round group of running backs? We talk about the Fournettes of the world, but you're getting into the Le'Veon Bells and the Todd Gurleys. Are these waters you want to fish in, or would you rather be hitting wide receiver at that point for our listeners out there that still need to draft this week?
I feel like the value, and so just to start with, the right answer to every question that you're asking is one of the reasons why I like listening to you guys and Dwain is roster construction is always the right answer, and maybe sometimes your first round determines that, but I'm not averse. I like Chris Carson an awful lot in that range. I think Todd Gurley's serviceable in that range, and I think after that, it gets a little fishier, but I mean, you're still buying the workloads or the anticipated workloads at least. And that was the case even with Leonard Fournette. It's not a great offense, but hell, if he's going to touch the ball 300 times, I'll have some of that, please, as my running back 3. And so I'm going just because wide receivers, there seems to be a ton of value later in the drafts and guys I really like and guys that I think can be league winners where, if I'm drafting in the 6th, 7th, 8th round, I feel like they can produce well above that range. I've been hammering the running backs early. It's not like totally unheard of for me to go running backs. It's to come out of the first 5 rounds with 3 running backs, a tight end, and a quarterback, if it's Dak Prescott. I mean, it just, and the way I'm handling quarterbacks is I get to a point in a draft where if I don't love everybody that's sitting there in front of me, if I don't love anybody, and I mean love, hell, there's going to be a quarterback there that I can live with. Right. And so I kind of been taking that approach and playing wide receivers later. So I've been rolling right through those, that 3rd round tier and feel pretty comfortable with it because it's not my first running back. And I think that's the key to this. As long as it's not the guy you're counting on to get the job done, then I'm fine with it.
So, Dwain, you've got almost a little instant ADP update here on a draft you're following on Latavius Murray, who we were just talking about.
Yeah, I have a buddy of mine, Perry. He's in my home league. He drafts a lot of FPC teams just like I do. And he's probably listening to us. He just texted me. He's like, Lat Murray, 908.
There you go.
If he goes there, I'll tell you right now, if Lat Murray makes it to round 8, he's not passing me. I will draft him every time in round 8. I'll stop whatever I'm doing. And I'll set it aside and I'm going to draft him. Heck, I'll probably draft him in the 7th and draft CeeDee Lamb in the 8th. So,
I mean, that's the kind of league winner you're looking for, I mean, that's the kind of play that if it works out right, look, it's not such a significant investment that it's going to kill you if it doesn't. Yep. And if it does, it's going to win you a league.
Do we really think he's going to sit out a year?
Chase?
I don't
think it'll be the year, but we don't know for sure. I mean, these running backs, we saw it with Melvin Gordon. I mean, he did it for half a year. So, I mean, man, when you lose that many games, Lat Murray, even if he's just your guy for 6 weeks, that can bridge a lot of stuff for you. It's very valuable. But, for me, it is always back to what Bob just said, a minute ago. It comes back, to roster construction. And if he's there, in that round, I mean, I think it's too much, to pass. I mean, people are already willing to draft Chase Edmonds in the 9th. People are drafting Alexander Mattison in the 8th. I mean, right now I feel better about Lat Murray than either one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so number one. I mean, there's reasons to believe all these guys with their contract issues are going to get them resolved. I mean, Alvin Kamara, for starters, and I mean, look, we're in an era now where running backs are doing strange things. I mean, Le'Veon Bell got the ball rolling and did something none of us expected. So I'm not saying this is impossible, but basically, if you hold out this year for the season, you're limiting your money. Yeah, it was the same with Dalvin Cook. I mean, you're going to come back and not have an accrued year free agency, and you're going to be stuck playing for $5 million instead of playing for the franchise tag or, having those offers. So it makes sense. But honestly, man, the way things have gone recently, I mean, even going to Melvin Gordon, I mean, I never would have expected, I didn't think it was to his advantage to miss those games. He did. They see it differently than me. And it's probably because I'm used to old time football where that didn't work, or I still don't think it works, but Le'Veon Bell got paid a hell of a lot of money, even if he's not still the same player yet. So, I mean, I think that's what they're looking at. So I think these things will be resolved. I think all these guys will end up playing. But in the meantime, it's going to create havoc with some of these drafts where people are taking guys based on that. Again, it's the lure gets thrown in the water and we all start chasing.
Hey, Bob, what would be your line? You're looking at your kind of your list, your tiers. What would be your line of the backs that you're getting to where you're like, you know what, once I get past this, if Murray's there, I'm going to pull the trigger, especially say you took a Jonathan Taylor in round 3.
Yeah, it would be not far after that. I mean, honestly, but it'd be a few rounds after. But player wise, I mean,
player wise,
right up until the injury, David Montgomery was the tail end of that list. I'm kind of out on Singletary, who was kind of bringing up the rear of that for a while. Now with Zach Moss, until he catches a little more fire. If that happens in the next week, I'm still drafting him much later. So I think, looking at the same price point as maybe Zach Moss right now, 8th round, 9th round. I think Moss may be going up to the 7th. I don't know. I should look before I say.
He has some, but he has a range on him. He's one of those players that he could go 7, he could go, and sometimes he'll fall to 10.
Right.
He's got a pretty wide band on him.
I saw someone in the chat mention Gibson. I don't know if they're just being facetious or not, but I mean, there's a guy we're drafting already. I've seen him go in the 7th round. I don't know what the hell he's going to be. I mean, I don't know if the Washington football team knows what he's going to be. I think they have plans, and I think their desired outcome is he plays a significant role, and I'm willing to gamble on that. Yeah, but I'd rather gamble on a guy whose role I know. If I'm getting up into the 7th round, if it's later than that, like the 9th, all bets are off. I'll take anything.
Yeah, that's right about where I've got Lat Murray. Sorry, Drake. That's about the line that I've got him at as well, right in that group.
We're hanging out tonight with Bob Harris, the football diehard from Sirius XM. You can catch his show there. You guys are on all sorts of crazy nights here. When can we?
Don't ask. I have no idea.
It's all over the board, but it's madness there. Mike Dempsey does a fantastic job. Dwain has been a guest with the football diehards, including this past weekend when they were on Sirius XM NFL radio. So check them out over there. That's always a super fun channel to listen to. Let me circle back quickly.
You'll be back, and so will you. Your turn is coming.
Oh, hey, we're here. We're always here to help promote. One thing I love promoting on the show is our rivalry as the Cowboys fan Dwain and the Eagles fan in Brian Drake. So let's circle back to those Eagles because we mentioned Miles Sanders, but we also should touch on Jalen Reagor, who's going to be out a month with this labrum tear. Some people can play through it, a la George Kittle, but he's electing to shut it down. They're hoping he'll be okay in a month. Now you've got this offensive line injuries. What are you guys doing with Carson Wentz, with Zach Ertz? We talked about Sanders already, Dallas Goedert. To me, as an Eagles fan who is very focused on this football team, Zach Ertz is the greatest value at tight end there is, even though you're going to have to take him in the 5th round because he's going to get the targets. It's D-Jax for as many times as he can limp off the field, but he's going to break up that coverage. You can no longer squat on those Eagles short routes because that safety has got to play high. They've got to respect him. You're going to respect Hightower, now the other rookie they brought in. They've got speed all over the place. So are you guys still looking to draft Reagor? and Wentz, or are you kind of putting the pause button on those two guys with this injury?
Yeah,
go ahead,
Bob.
Dwayne.
You go. No, you go.
Well, the offensive line issues are becoming a little worrisome for me, but not to the point where I'm dialing back on Wentz. I mean, look, he demonstrated really solid ability to put up a good floor last year, playing with a depleted, receiving core, running back situation as it was. I mean, thank goodness Miles Sanders came on and averaged 10 yards catch and all those things that worked out in his favor. But having those tight ends to count on, look, he still threw for 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, and there were plenty of issues there. So if he's in my sights or he's falling to me in a draft or I'm drafting a quarterback in a place where I have him valued, I'm not gonna back off too far. I think I agree on Ertz. I think 5th round Ertz is really appealing. Sadly, I will have already drafted Mark Andrews in the 3rd or 4th, so it'll never matter. I like a lot of headroom there for Mark Andrews if he gets a full, snap count. I mean, just he's going to be quite a weapon. To me, I think he could push up against the Kittle and Kelsey tier this year. So, but that said, if I miss out on him and it's the 5th round and I see Zach Ertz sitting there, I'm thinking, wow, that's a pretty solid floor. And I don't think there's anything changes that. I mean, he's never going to, he's not going to have that 2 seasons ago catch total, but he doesn't need to, not at that price. So I'm fine with that as well. Beyond that, the receiving core, Deshaun Jackson in the 11th round all day long. Give it to me.
Yeah, so here's the way I would break the team down. I'm not really targeting Wentz because of the offensive line injuries. And it's not that I don't like him. It's just that there are too many other guys right there that I'll take over Wentz all day. I'll take Tom Brady over Wentz. I'll take Matt Stafford over Wentz. I'll take Matt Ryan over Wentz. I mean, and now Ryan goes sooner, but Brady and Stafford fall behind Wentz. So for me, there's just not a lot of value for me in Wentz with Rager hurt and the offensive line injuries. And we're hoping that Miles Sanders, is better. So I think the Eagles eventually will get to a strength in the season. They'll catch their groove. Their offensive line will have some unity. But I just don't want to wait 6 or 8 weeks for it to happen. And it's so scary when your offense is so dependent on Deshaun Jackson. I agree on the 11th round pick. I often take Will Fuller in the 5th and I take Deshaun Jackson in the 11th. And I'm like, between the two of them, I just need one of them healthy every week to stick in my lineup. And I'll be super happy, right, with that point total that they put up. And who knows, man, you get a couple of weeks where you're using both of them with some bye week stuff going on. I'm all about it. I love that pick. But what I'll say for an NFL offense, look, we just can't count on Deshaun Jackson to finish a season. And that's the problem. When that happened last year and they lost that vertical element, people just started down the stretch. They put the clamps on Ertz. And that's why Goddard kind of broke out at the end of the season. Ertz went from in week 14, he went nuts for 30 points and it was 17-7-0-6, where Goddard was 11-24, 11-14 because the teams just started trying to take away Ertz. They're he's what they have. Now, Ertz was also playing hurt right at the end of the year. So that was an issue as well. But I'm with you guys on Ertz. I have no problem with him and his floor. I'm going to take Miles Sanders when he slides to me because, he's a guy that honestly, as much as I love him, I was in drafts earlier this offseason where he was going at 5 or 6 and I was like, man, I like Miles Sanders, but that's freaking rich. Well, now I get him at, 11 or 12. Bob, I got him in an FFPC. I was picking 5th. He came all the way back to me in the 2nd. That's how scared people were. That was a $350 draft, and I got Miles Sanders in the late 2nd. Yeah. I haven't gone to look. I'm pretty sure that's the latest anybody's got him out of about 7,000 drafts. So I was super happy about that. But yeah. So, and I paired him with Derrick Henry. There's only 12 of those pairs. But anyway, when you look at Sanders, I'm still buying, when he slides. Ertz is the main guy that I'm just kind of not Ertz. Wentz is the guy that I'm just kind of he's injury prone. He's got the bad line. There's just other guys I like. I think Stafford's gonna outscore Carson Wentz on a straight up year anyway. I like his weapons.
For the record, I rank Stafford ahead of him right now, and Brady's right there, and I'd be fine. I mean, you could envision Brady finishing 5th. Yeah, I mean, a top 5 guy easily. So I'm kind of with you there. I'm just, if I was targeting him where he's going, it's late enough that I'm not worried, and I'm going to grab somebody later that I feel like has some upside as well. If I'm drafting 2 quarterbacks. So, he's just, I always say this, you draft an upside guy and you get a steady Eddie. I think Wentz is reasonably steady, based on what we saw last year. It just seems like a solid floor on any given week. And if you take a chance on the other quarterback or another quarterback, you can get by.
Let me ask you this, Bob. You're a great guy to bounce this off. You and your co-host on SiriusXM, Mike Dempsey, love to take tight ends early. I've seen numerous drafts over the summer where Kelsey or Kittle, or as you just said, Andrews, go to you guys at the end of the first round or second round or something like that. We love, as we said, talking roster construction here on The Hustle. Talk our folks who are still going to draft this week through, if you're going to take a tight end in the second or third round, how the rest of that roster might shake out and what you might have to wait on and some maybe targets therein for the rest of that draft.
Yeah, I think it costs me a little bit at running back, if I'm going to go in that second round. Ideally, I'll get a running back in the first round, and depending on where I'm at, and look, or unless I'm drafting with Sigmund Bloom, at which point I'm going to have to take that tight end in the first round if I really want him. But because Bloom will go, Bloom has no problem going Kelsey in the first round, right? So,
Bloom was always the Gronk guy too.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I, to me, the ideal drafts, like where I go a little bit outside that like 3 running backs coming out of the first 5 rounds, is if I get, say, the first pick and I get McCaffrey, I come back around. I'll go Lamar Jackson and Kittle, or Lamar Jackson and Kelsey, or something. And, those are the times when I'll go on that bite on the early quarterback, just because I feel like, again, the roster construction, I have that super high end running back. Okay, I'm going to be okay. That gives me a little bit of flexibility. Similar circumstance would be as if I somehow, if I'm sitting there at the 10th pick and there's Michael Thomas. Mm-hmm. Okay, all of a sudden I'm now a guy drafting a wide receiver in the first round. Then I'm going to get, but that lets me take chances later on. I can go those 3 running backs, or I can go maybe even 3 running backs and Mark Andrews somewhere in that range, and then come out and start worrying about wide receivers later. So because I have that super high floor guy, and I guess that's what makes it easier for me to go. If I'm going to go Kittle or Kelsey in that second round, I need to have a fairly early pick and be pretty confident in the guy I'm getting at running back. Otherwise, I'm waiting for Mark Andrews in the 3rd or 4th.
Interesting. So let me talk about some more running backs here. We love the rookies. We were big on Deandre Swift during our draft plan show. Dwain and I did. And if you haven't listened to that yet, go check it out in our archives on iTunes, wherever you get our podcast, or especially on YouTube. It's doing fantastic there. But Swift returned in a limited fashion to the Lions practice, but we've got word that Kerryon Johnson might be leading this backfield early on. Are you buying the dip on the Georgia Bulldog, whose ADP over the last 2 days in those Football Guys Players Championships is around 6'1"?
I'll let go ahead, Dwayne. I know you will, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm buying, absolutely. I mean, I liked him in the 5th round. I like him better in the 6th or the 7th, right? I'm fine with Kerryon Johnson starting off the year with. Here was my expectation of the role. They were going to split it, and he's going to get the passing work, and that's still what they're saying. So basically, the way I look at it is I get a round to 2 rounds discount on Deandre Swift. He's still going to have the same role he was going to have. He may start a little slower in week 1. And I still think there's the injury risk with Kerryon Johnson. I mean, you're having to work maintenance. He's got a knee brace that he's having to wear. And I like Kerryon Johnson. I mean, he's a player that I really liked a lot, over the last 2 years. But the draft capital they spent, man, I'm totally good with it. And again, it's a roster construction thing. I like Deandre Swift as my 3rd back, right? I've already got 2. I've got 3 receivers. And now I take my 3rd back that's an upside guy that can, worst case, he takes 3 or 4 weeks to get going. That's fine. I'm not depending on him. I'm going to build my roster in a way where I don't have to. But I think at that point in your draft, it's hard to find many players that give you as much upside as a young running back like that.
Do the Lions still intend to run the football? Can they play defense? Is there? I mean, no, I'm just kidding. Half joking. He is. That's my concern with him, is if they're going to have a hard time running the football, if their defense is still as miserable as it was, and perhaps it won't be. I don't know. I think it will. What's the primary objective here? Keeping Matthew Stafford in the locked and upright position. Whoever is there better know how to pass protect. And if there's anything that a rookie is going to struggle with, and especially one that missed some time early on, that's what Matt Patricia was talking about too this week. That'd be my only concern. But if I was drafting one of those running backs it's absolutely Swift. I have zero faith in Kerryon Johnson. And it's zero interest in him. And the only reason I'm interested in Swift now is because the price might be falling.
What do we do in Chicago where David Montgomery's got a groin strain? He could miss about a month. To me, I'm out. I don't want anything to do with a running back with a bad groin. It's very similar to this hamstring thing with Miles Sanders. Here's the difference. I was thinking about this today. The known versus the unknown. Until Kaplan came out with that story saying it's a hamstring, we didn't know anything about this. All we know is, lower body injury for Sanders. They believe he'll be ready for opening day. Nothing to see here. Go about your business. When you know it's a groin strain, now all bets are off. Everyone's out. If that was just David Montgomery's got a lower body injury, he could be out a while. Now we don't know what's going on. Maybe we're thinking, it's not too bad. But what are we doing here? Tariq Cohen, if you're in a PPR, he's going in the 8th round. He's not equipped to go between the tackles. Are we kind of sniffing around Cordarrelle Patterson? We're Ryan Nall. I mean, do we want to take a shot at any of these guys or just punt the Bears totally?
Well, I'd wait till Leonard Fournette shows up there. That would be no. So, I mean, like when I was drafting Montgomery, in addition to feeling dirty every time I did it, I would try to console myself by saying, well, the workload's going to be consistent and maybe he can do something with it that we didn't see last year. And some of that, you hang your hat on Matt Nagy talking about running the ball more just in order to take some pressure off his quarterback. I don't know if any of that is possible. I think the times that I've gotten Montgomery, it was mostly because he was that third back and at the very tail end of the workload guys. And my expectations are pretty low. And, we all know the secret to happiness is managing your expectations. And I don't have a hell of a lot for Montgomery other than I think he's going to get a lot of carries. Now I think he's going to get fewer and I'm much less interested.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's again, matter of how far he falls, so since the injury, I've only drafted him once and people let him fall all the way to the 8th round. And I was like, okay, I'll take him here, and I mean, I can work my roster around. And he was my 4th running back, on that team. So in those scenarios, I'm still going to buy, on a player, like that and just hope that they just really ease him back. As long as they don't rush him, you could be okay. Now we could wake up tomorrow morning and he could be in Fournette, like Bob said, could be a bear. And that's really, then it's over, for David Montgomery, because then it will be Fournette and Tariq Cohen and probably not, maybe they use all 3 of them, but we'll see what happens. But when he's falling, assuming that doesn't occur, that's when I'll take him. I mean, it's got to be though in that range because there's players in the 6th and 7th round. Man, there's players I still really, really want to own. That's the thing with this year. It's like through round, man, every round there's a player there that I'm like, man, I like 3. Which one am I taking? And I'm in 20 round drafts.
I feel like it's the same for me, except all those players that I really want, once I get outside the 5th round are wide receivers. I just want them all. I want every damn one. I want 3 of them in the 6th round. I want 4 of them in the 7th round. And there's just not enough room on my rosters. That's what's been driving this running back early, the Mark Andrews, being okay taking Dak in the 5th. And then going, here we go, jumping into that batch of guys that I love. And even, extended down. We talked about, Deshaun Jackson, the 11th. There are guys going in the 11th and 12th rounds that I could kind of live with that I think still have a chance to be league winners. They're mostly a little earlier. But, man, there's just a thick band of those guys that allow us to work like that. And I'm not drafting a lot of running backs in that, or other positions in that range of players just because I love the wide receivers so much.
Here's the move, what you do with David Montgomery. If you get him as, like you said, Dwain, your 4th running back, you stick him on your roster. The week he's ready to come back, you trade his ass because that's when his value is going to be the highest. Some thirsty team in your league is going to be like, all right, here David Montgomery's coming back. I need a running back. So-and-so got hurt. And then boom, you get him off your roster and you get somebody who went 3 rounds earlier for him. Let's talk about that, Drake. Hey, I'm always looking to deal. Let's talk about the Patriots. They might have a fantastic goal line back in their quarterback, Cam Newton, but today they just activated Lamar Miller off the PUP. We still have James White. Sony Michel's bopping around. Everyone's high on Damian Harris. Don't forget Rex Burkhead's there. Bob, what are you doing with this backfield? Is this kind of a wait till the last guy is there? Give me James White in a PPR or just the hell with all these guys?
Well, there was a point where, I went into this, making my 10-foot pole lists, of guys that I really don't want to deal with as I head into draft season. And Sony Michel was on it. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting Sony Michel in the 7th, 8th, 9th round. I'm going, okay, well, I'll put the pole away. That was even when he was still on the pup and thinking he would come off. And then I got to a point where I was saturated. I went, okay, I'm going to back off a little bit. And I didn't go any of the other directions. I didn't dive in after Damian Harris. The James White shares, that I get, I'm fine with. But then he comes off pup and I'm kind of getting interested again. And then Lamar Miller comes off pup. And once again, the same thing applies that is applied since Bill Belichick's been the coach of this team for the most part. It is the Gordian knot of NFL backfields. You cannot untie it. You can only hope to not overpay for the piece that you have, and that the piece that you have gets enough playing time, or at least gives you the hope that you can figure out when to play him. And honestly, at best, Michel at his best, the end of his rookie season was probably the best we've seen, the most predictable running back usage we've seen, not for a guy named James White. Maybe I'm hoping for that again, but I've bought it so cheap that it doesn't matter. I'll toss him aside like yesterday's used newspaper if that's how it works out. But it's just such a tough backfield.
It really is. If I'm investing, the two I'm investing in PPR are James White and Damian Harris. And it's just, every once in a while, if I need to get hyper aggressive because I started off with, a one running back, one tight end, and 3 receivers, like I will reach a little bit on an upside guy because I know I can circle back around and get like these floor guys later. So sometimes I'll include Harris in that mix. I'll include Zach Moss in that mix. I've taken them both together right there before. We've shown people a draft like that, Drake, where it was the Dwain scared shitless because he doesn't know who his RB2 is, but everything else looks really good draft. So I get when I get backed into a corner, I get hyper aggressive. So, that's when I'll try stuff like that. But Michel, I've taken a couple of times because sometimes he felt me like in the 14th round of one draft, the 13th of another. I'm like, I don't know what to do anymore. It's like,
that was at Pros versus Joes. We did that live on the air. And then we're like, oh my God, it's like the 14th round. We're like, I guess we could take Sony Michel. We felt terrible about it. I think people booed us.
I've literally drafted him after Joshua Kelly, a guy I know Dwain likes. We both have the same guy whispering in our ear on that one, and Matt Waldman. But also everyone since then. Talk to Gilbert Manzano from the Orange County Register, who, I just kind of ran by. So tell me how stupid I am for believing in Joshua Kelly. No, dude, it's totally real. And, I've been drafting him and the price has been rising a little bit, but there came a point where I think I got him like 2 rounds before I was getting Sony Michel. Look, I don't expect that Sony Michel from the end of his rookie season, but I know he's there. He's there somewhere. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Cam Newton's going off the board in the 14th round. What do you think about him?
If there's a coaching staff that can figure out how to make this work, it's that one. And we've seen Josh McDaniels figure out what to do with Tim Tebow. So my guess is they'll figure something out here and make him a viable play. And one of those guys, if you're drafting him that late as your second quarterback, he's not without upside. My only concern with him is we haven't seen him threaten the defense deep for 3 years, 4 years, maybe, with that shoulder and then the foot. I haven't seen the mobility. So I'd like to see those things, but paying the price I'm paying, I'll wait and see if I see him when the season starts as I'm playing somebody else.
Yeah, if I miss Brady, I miss Stafford, I miss that group. He's my last guy. He's the guy I take. I go straight to Newton. Then I may grab something, later, like you said, Bob, I may circle back to somebody like a Roethlisberger or something like that. A lot of times I'll just draft one because my waivers all run the week before and, all the quarterbacks are never drafted. So, but yeah, I think Newton is the guy that the way I look at him is he could be basically a Josh Allen arbitrage play like 5 rounds later, right? I don't like his weapons as much, but I like his coaching better. He's going to get the work, down inside the 5. I think he's going to get plenty of that. What do the Patriots have to lose, with this guy? They got him on a 1-year deal. I think they're going to use him. And the good news is, Bob, I don't know that they have anybody that can go deep. So they'll just have to throw underneath.
You think about the guys that they drafted in Carolina was like a basketball team, Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess, Brandon LaFell.
Wide catch radius guys.
And so
but he did really good though with those smaller guys.
But
exactly for that half season.
Right. It was like it was. And so I'm totally like thinking, man, people are way over backing off of Julian Edelman. And
Yes.
now Gunnar Olszewski is now the apple of everyone's eyes. But, also pitching a 13th, 14th rounder at N'Keal Harry when that was happening. And maybe he's gone lower since because it hasn't been all that impressive. I think you could do worse than that, especially to a guy who drafts Alshon Jeffrey on occasion in that range too. So.
Well, I do have one last question for you on the back, so Bob. So the way I look at it, I'm staring at it right now, and with how the news is, it's like literally nobody. Gunner's stepping up, and they're saying he can get open, but he's got to work on his hands, and he's kind of like a duplicate, right, of Edelman. It's like, okay, great. I mean, so to me, I'm sitting here looking at this, and I'm like, is James White the wide receiver 2 on this team?
Probably. And that's a guy Cam Newton could hit because, as you said, it was the guys out of the backfield. It was the short area guys. And if he's not throwing the ball deep, I mean, I don't know what I'm expecting of anybody that's not that short and intermediate route runner. So, yeah, it probably is. And look, James White every single year ends up being a guy to own. Whether he ends up, it's still like running back 2 numbers in PPR. So, yeah, I can co-sign on that, and I don't think Cam Newton hurts that, and I think the coaching staff will continue to use him like that. But
he can play that CMC role.
Yeah, I hadn't been drafting him, but I found over the last couple of drafts, the more that just nobody else is stepping up, and like Harry is just all bad news, and it's the detail stuff that if you read a guy like Matt Waldman, when you hear the things that are popping up, you're like, oh, that's bad. Like he just doesn't do the little things that those coaches are going to really want, like drifting out of the back of the end zone. And so he's already out of bounds before he can catch the touchdown. They talked about how he doesn't know how to work a sideline. His timing's not right. I mean, his footwork is off. It's like he's still an athlete, but it's like, God, this guy is still such a work in progress. Man, I'm just starting to think it's just going to your point, it's going to be Edelman. And I think it's going to be James White. And so I'm starting to get some exposure to James White. Where I like him is, again, like if I took an upside kind of back and you can grab him as your 3rd or as your 4th. Mm-hmm. I think in one of my drafts the other day, I actually took Swift, and then I came back and I grabbed White, and I already that was my 4th back. And then I was basically like what Bob said. I was just done. I just like nailed the receivers and some of my upside tight ends, and I felt great.
Yeah, Edelman's one of those 7th round, one of the 5,000 7th round wide receivers that I would love to have more of, but there's so many of them. I'm having a hard time getting those shares. But that's I think the thing about wide receiver this year. He highlights that issue. But you're right. I think with Harry, if you're drafting him, as I have very late, you're drafting the investment the Patriots made and his athleticism and a little bit of hope, because there's nothing there to hang your hat on beyond that if you've been reading the practice reports. And the same with Mohamed Sanu right now. I mean, I've been having a lamer camp for anybody than him.
And they gave up, a 2nd round pick for him too?
Yeah. Yeah. Oof. Yeah. I'm with you on Harry. For that price, I'm totally in. Maybe a switch goes off. You never know with these guys. Sometimes that happens. And to your point, they got to give him, enough runway, because of the pick that was invested. So I like him. Man, I see him go anywhere between round 14 and 16, in pretty sharp drafts. So I think that's a pretty fair price.
2 more things for the Hall of Famer, Bob Harris. We appreciate the time he's given us. Number 1, you have a sign behind you that says, "Ask me about my cat." Are we referencing Ming the Merciless?
That would be one of the 2 cats, yes. I don't know where he is, but when he's around, there's like 30 pounds of him. It's hard to miss.
That's awesome. So finally, let's get you out of here with this. We've got folks drafting here on Labor Day weekend and maybe all week long. Give us like 3 bullet points, players to target, somebody maybe who's off the radar. Everybody always hits me up, my buddies, my brother-in-law, whoever. They go, "Hey, give me a sleeper. Give me somebody late in drafts." And Dwain and I did the same thing because we texted each other pictures of it today. And we go, "Take Chris Thompson late for $1 or whatever." So hit some folks with a little knowledge before we get you out of here.
Joshua Kelly.
Okay.
Hoping that he winds up filling that Melvin Gordon role in that Chargers offense and possibly more, right? I mean, look, I'm not out on Austin Eckler, but I think we have awful high expectations of a guy who did something one year with a quarterback and now has a different quarterback. Look, some of it was by design. I'm not denying that. The usage of him, but some of it was also Phillip Rivers. You saw him just lock in, right? And is Austin Eckler going to catch all 92 passes thrown his way every single year? That's just.
But he posts shirtless pictures on Twitter. I mean, we have to raise him in our rankings.
Monster. Look, you guys, until you meet Melvin Gordon in person, you have not seen a monster. You want to talk about a guy that's jacked up. It's nuts. But anyhow, I digress. Joshua Kelly, Jamison Crowder, if you're not drafting him in that 10th round range, when he's sitting there, and I mean, if you want a sure thing, to me is a sure thing. And I guess I want to be something just super crazy. Look, I'm still drafting the hell out of Daniel Jones. The price is dropping because everyone's caught on to the early schedule being tough. I get it. And you could probably go without drafting him, and whoever drafts him will quit on him after that 4-game run. But I still love him. And look, Joe Burrow's growing on me. I'm hearing things about Joe Burrow that are insane. Jay Morrison from The Athletic is like just totally almost sold me on this. Just the quote was, the accuracy is stunning, and that he understands how to put the ball. And we've heard it, like Alden Tate is the training camp MVP. Well, he's the MVP because he runs to the back of the end zone, and Joe Burrow puts the ball where only he can catch it. I think he can do the same for AJ Green. I think he can do the same with T. Higgins. I think he can do the same with Tyler Boyd. I think Joe Burrow is going to be a big plus for this offense, and it gives me more hope for guys like Joe Mixon, who I like. So I guess those quarterbacks, a little later, guys that maybe shouldn't be overlooked. My love for Danny Dimes is waned a little bit based on the schedule and based on some of the the offensive line developments, but it hasn't totally gone. But Joe Burrow is growing on me and fast overtaking.
What about one tight end, Bob? What about who's your if you don't get your guys early? Or maybe even you get your guy early, but there's another one that you want to throw on at the end, and a lot of people ignore him. Jack
Doyle's the safe play to me. You look at the Chargers under Frank Reich, the share of passes that go to the tight end. Sorry, Trey Burton, you had your moment. I don't think it's coming. We can go to Mo Alley Cox, but I think if you look at the numbers, I'm pretty sure Doyle was the second most targeted Colt after Eric Ebron left last year. And I think the target share they devote to that guy is a big deal. And of course, I would be remiss if I did tell everyone to fire the dismissal. Every single chance you get, Will Dissly, converted defensive tackles are the new tight ends of the world. So fire your last round pick off at Will Dissly. He's amazing.
There it is. So we got a good hour out of the Hall of Famer, Bob Harris. Follow him on Twitter at Football Diehard. If you're in a grocery store, Bob, which magazine should folks pick up?
This year, they should pick up the Fantasy Football Pro Forecast. It's our 31st year of that, and the 20th anniversary edition of the Football Diehards magazine. So check those out. A little limited title run this year for the obvious reasons. We'll be back full blast next year, but for right now, and you can go to the Football Diehards website and buy them as well.
There you go. This year, I'm telling you, there's a lot of guys who are going out this week, and they're like, oh my God, I have a draft on Saturday. I know because 11 of them are in my league that is drafting Saturday night here in Syracuse. So they're going to the grocery store and gobbling up these magazines.
Grab the magazine, but don't use the rankings in the magazine. Go to the website. It's free if you use the code in the magazine to get the updated rankings, please.
There you go.
Drake's like, no, guys, use the ones in the magazine. Buy the magazine and then use the rankings in the magazine. Drake's gonna edit.
There's guys who always ask me, they're like, oh, I can't get rankings. Can you print me out some rankings? So I always try to find the worst rankings from like 6 months ago. I'm like, here, take this is from last year.
You got them all on the coffee table.
Yeah, just take whatever you want. Pick one, But for Dwain McFarland of Pro Football Focus and Established the Run, I am Brian Drake. Bob Harris, the legend himself, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time. And everybody else out there, good luck this weekend. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a 5-star review on iTunes, and more importantly, never get out hustled.